To introduce myself, I'm Peter Sofer, the creator of the Art of Pseudo grad school decision model. The decision on whether or not to go to graduate school is one that's near and dear to my heart. I'm somebody who spent 3 years in a concurrent MBA MPA program, which is a master's program. And it's the sort of thing where you won't even really know until 20 years from now as to whether that's a good decision. I ended up with a job I really like out of school, so that that helps sort of validate the decision to go. But I still sort of question sometimes whether, in hindsight, like I just may have gotten a little lucky with my job, and in hindsight, whether it was actually the right decision to go or not, just given my circumstances, opportunities outside, if I hadn't gone to grad school, and just the fact that if you don't do grad school the right way, it can actually be counterproductive because you take years of your career to do something that isn't that may not be building enough towards the thing you actually want to do. So um, and so just it's this, and I'm sure that it's grass is always greener type of thing too. So people who choose not to go to grad school may wonder if their opportunities might be better if they had made a different choice, and vice versa. um, for some people, the decision is easy. If you're excelling at a hedge fund or a big tech company and you know you want that as your career, forgoing grad school makes sense from a monetary and career building standpoint. Conversely, if you know you want to be a professor or a doctor or a lawyer, there's no escaping graduate school. But for most of us, the answer isn't clear. It's rare to know what you want for sure out of your career when it's just beginning, when we're making these decisions to go or not. And the mission of the Art of Pseudo grad school decision model is to transparently lay out the decision's personal and financial trade-offs in a customizable manner, and thereby adding clarity to the decision. And so the initial component of this model is just understanding the initial component of deciding whether or not you should go to grad school is understanding your the your path without grad school and what the most sort of realistic, compelling paths you have for you, from a financial and from financial and other perspectives. And the four categories that we evaluate here are money, power, impact, and pleasure and fulfillment. And so I've just populated some of these inputs for a generic 25-year-old. I'm 31, so this isn't me, but it's just sort of what somebody's decision might look like. So the initial inputs in all the orange cells, the light orange cells, are customizable input cells. And so for this fictional person, their annual current compensation is $50,000. In 5 years, they expect $80,000. In 10 years, they expect 110,000. In 15 years, 140. In 20 years, 170. In 25, 200. In 30 years, annual compensation of $225,000. And in terms of just how they would evaluate this sort of this ideal realistic non-grad school path on non-financial metrics, they consider, just on terms of control over your own hours, 6 out of 10, control over others internally, 5 out of 10, control over others externally, 5 out of 20, potential for fame is 0, potential for expertise is 18 out of 25. In terms of impact, this is a very high impact job, apparently. So 20 out of 20, 60 out of 60, 18 out of 20. Work-life balance seems really good, so 12 out of 15. And The maximum score is the top one on in green here, and the minimum score is the bottom one in green, just to orient those following along. Work-life balance is pretty good. Creative freedom is really high. So basically, this job ranks really well um, across the board. And then in terms of personalization, um, the questions I input here include, just going to expand this so that we can more easily see the categories, see the questions. Might your reading speed impede your success in this job? The answer here is no. Might your writing ability impede your success? Does this track involve a science PhD level amount of data set building? No. Does this track involve a science PhD level amount of lab time? Does it involve a substantial amount of coding? Does it does this track require elite math abilities? Does it require elite science abilities? And does this job require elite people skills? And the reasons for these questions are because people might have personal preferences for or against jobs that involve these kind of characteristics. So it enables a personalized sort of uh, uh, a personalization multiple to be gathered for your for this career track. And so then once you've filled in your expectations for your non-grad school path, the next step is to fill in your expectations for compensation 20 years from now. The default is 50,000, just so that the model doesn't discriminate against lower paying jobs unless it's forced to. But for some people, it can't. Their choice. Some choices can be. You can choose up to $1 million, and that would sort of just exclusive. That would just mean that you want to be a hedge fund person. Then it asks how old are you and when you expect to retire. So just how long will your career be? So on a financial basis, probably the first 2 to 5 years of this would be grad school, where you would be paying or making a very low sum. And so this just works into the net present value equation of the the expected return on your investment if you do go to grad school versus if you don't. Then are there types of work that you just you don't like? So for me, I would put law in there. Um, I know that I would never in a million years want to be a lawyer. I'm probably not great at hard engineering either, but um, just so that there are more options that are provided, I'm just going to leave these to the default for now, so that it doesn't skew rankings. Um, are you considering PhD or master's programs, PhDs, or both? The default is both. Personally, it would be really hard for me to do a PhD, but um, that's for the person who inputs the model to the side. And how many years do you envision yourself being happy slash stable in school? School really is a grind, and it's not for all people. So and they're just feelings of, oh, am I making the right decision being here? Am I holding myself back? And especially for PhDs that go on for 6 and 7 years, um, it really is trying on your state of mind. So this question is more, what do you feel your endurance for grad school really is? Then the next set of questions are the career building questions. To what extent do you know your desired career? Some people really do know it and have a very clear vision, but most of us have a general idea of what would be fulfilling, which is the default here. But some of us have some of us are just very lost. I'm a lot lost, not just a little lost. And so if you do have a sense for what your desired career would be, um, you can input that career. So the top of this list is medical related jobs. Say that you knew you wanted to be a neurosurgeon, or you not you know, but you think that that's the job you consider most desirable. What are your chances of attaining this job with grad school? Probably, I mean, that's a really competitive job for med students. So maybe 50%. If you attend a non-elite program, what's your job? What's the chance of getting this job? I mean, probably like 10%. And what's the probability of attaining this job um, if you don't do grad school? 0%. You need to get an MD. What if you also considered, um, let's do non-med school jobs. What if you also considered, um, let's see. What if you also considered management consulting just the thing you wanted to do? Um, if you go to an elite grad school, even if you don't get a job at like McKinsey or something, you probably have like a 90% or at least probably an 80% chance of getting a good management consulting job. Probably a little less, probably 75%. Um, if you go to a non-elite grad school, that probably is reduced to about 25%. And if you don't go to grad school, maybe that's 15%. And so you can do this for up to 5 jobs. And that so that the model can account for people who have a little more clarity on what they want to do. And then you can also prioritize the type of work you like. So do you like medical work? Do you like business work? Do you like law work? For me, I would say business, and then um, maybe uh, maybe environmental science, um, and economics would be really high, um, just based on my skill set and things like that. But it's different for everybody. Some people might say they like they're just a lot of people are just drawn to medical school or drawn to law school. And then what is the most desirable career track achievable without grad school? Where does that rank relative to your desired career? So the ones that you list up here, um, is say I had neurosurgeon here, and which I did before, and management consultant. How does my non-grad school path rank relative to the ones I've put here? And you could say at the top, you could say very high, you could say unclear, you could say very low, and the default is unclear. And then how much do you value the prospect of taking advantage of the student schedule to start a company or allocate time to another form of career building outside of class? And the answers are a real factor, not a factor, and that's just sort of um, that that that's a consideration that sort of props up grad school for somebody who wants that. Then the next is pleasure, fulfillment, and social questions. To what extent would you find time in an academic environment personally fulfilling? A lot of people just love the intellectual pursuit and just being on a campus, in a campus setting with professors that they can talk to. So you can say it's a large extent, or you could just uh, say you're not looking forward to it. Like some people just are trying to check the box in school and get out as fast as possible. Um, then how much do you envision the friendships and networks built in grad school adding to your joy of life? Um, Again, a lot, you could say large extent, little extent. How much do you value the dating pool afforded by grad school? So a lot of people who are pretty smart and around your age, um, how much do you how much do you need time away from your professional environment just to reevaluate? Some people just get stuck and see grad school as a way of of just sort of taking that time off to chart a new course and figure themselves out? How much do you value the prospect of taking advantage of the student schedule for travel or other fulfilling goals? Again, some people don't even go to grad school for the class part. Some people, for example, in business school where I went, will just really do the bare minimum in class and use it as 2 years to travel and see the world and complete their sort of personal goals. And that is a legitimate way of doing it. There, if you're going to be working 90-hour weeks before and after that, that 2 year stretch is a way of checking off things on your to-do list and not holding back your career. Then how much do you value the branding and credibility of graduating from an elite graduate school? So maybe you just like the thought of you having gone to a really elite program, and that's just something that you really want to have rationally or irrationally. To what extent will graduate school enable you to live in a part of the world you would consider aspirational? So this is true especially for a lot of international students. So I have a friend from Israel who decided to go to US grad school partly because he wanted an entree into being able to work in the US. And so that's a way a lot of international students might think. Even internally in the U.S., there are a lot of people I know who've lived in Texas all their lives and see grad school as sort of a path to get out of Texas, and that's just one example. I love Texas, so that's not a slight on Texas. Then, lastly, to what extent will the decision to attend grad school uproot your life and create stressful chaos in your personal/family situation? That's just sort of a variable in there where it's harder to go to grad school as an older person, partly because it's more likely you'll have a family and kids that you'll be uprooting, and that just makes the decision to go to school harder. Then personal talents. How fast a reader are you? How strong a writer are you? To what extent do you enjoy building data sets? Would you have the patience for a PhD program that involves a multi-year data set building process? To what extent do you enjoy time in the lab? To what extent do you enjoy the coding process? Are you confident in your ability to reach an aspirational level in math and engineering-based fields? Are you confident in your ability to reach an aspirational level in science-based fields and an aspirational level in people-oriented professions with a lot of networking? And so then once you fill in these personal inputs, the next step is determining how you rank, how you weight money versus power versus impact versus pleasure and fulfillment relative to the default. And so let's say for me, I would do, let's say 40, 10, 20, 30. And then you can just sort of do generic weighting. So if you, how much higher would you guess that graduating from an elite program, how much higher are the salaries for people from elite programs versus those from second tier programs? So that enables the decision of, for example, I'll go to business school if I get into a top 10 program, but not if I get into or a top 20 program, but not if it's lower than that kind of thinking. Because if it's lower than that, you might not be seeing the monetary benefit anyway on the back end. Then to what extent do you and then I guess relative to a second tier program, potential for power, potential for impact, potential for peace, pleasure, peace of mind. How much lower is tuition in for a second tier program? And um, and then uh, and then here are the weightings for the different variables that go into power, impact, and pleasure fulfillment. And so then once you've filled in these inputs, the we we so that's sort of what the user does, and then how the model works is that the model's creator, so me, um, provide for 300 plus uh, for 300 plus careers that stem from grad school. What I've done is um, I've scored these career tracks based on on money, power, uh, impact, and pleasure, fulfillment, peace of mind. And then there's a personalization factor as well. So uh, so these scores are to get the rankings for these jobs. These scores are these raw scores are on these raw category scores are multiplied are basically weighted averaged by how much by the so for money you would do money times the percent you weight money in the custom scenario, plus power times the percent you weight power, plus impact times the percent you weight impact, times pleasure, fulfillment, peace of mind times the amount you weight that, and then multiply that number times your personalization multiple. I left all the answers to personal questions blank here, so the personalization multiple is 0. And um, the way money is evaluated is that for each of these career tracks, I I I looked up. I basically built a financial data set where I looked up just basically what the sort of all-in cost is for these different programs, and then what the salary expectations are. So for medical school here, you see sort of the residency period salary expectations, and then the first year out, 5 years out, 20 years out, 30 years out, and so on. And for I got the medical school data through Doxonomy, which is a source where doctors can sort of evaluate the salaries of different types of doctor professions. For business school jobs, I got the salary data for 1, 5, 10, 20 years out from different graduate programs and just data that I've been able to access through friends. For law school, I got this data through the Cravath scale and then just various sources online, which have indicated sort of the range that partners, the range of salaries that partners make once they graduate from the Cravath scale. And then there are also sources online which give salary expectations on non-corporate lawyers that don't end up doing corporate law. And then for the other professions, I looked up sort of similar metrics for and some of the career paths that stem from sort of engineering degrees and science degrees and math degrees. Some of them are the classic uh, like math PhD who becomes a professor. But there are also the corporate tracks as well. So you could be a corporate analyst. You could be a math PhD who goes into a hedge fund or a venture capital firm. And so I really do try and include non-traditional career tracks that are possible with a degree, as well as the traditional career tracks in here. And this data set in and of itself is just really interesting, just to learn sort of the net present value of different types of grad schools hedge funds are really high. Uh, and I think the highest, if I remember correctly, at least in the at least at least in the modern society, is if you get an AI machine learning PhD from a top tier computer science uh, graduate program, um, you have really high. Um, you get basically like sports star salaries in big tech companies, or you can, according to The Economist. But that's a slight digression. Basically, so money, these jobs are score their money scores are based on the expected um, net present value and internal and IRR for these different programs. And then for each of these paths, I score them sort of subjectively based on what I know on the components of power, on the components of social impact, and the components of peace, pleasure, peace of mind. And these are subjective inputs, so my biases are baked into these results. I did my best to be an impartial jury on this, but if for somebody who has this model, if they think that some of these inputs are off, they can just go in and change some of these inputs and see how the rankings are adjusted accordingly. But I think that's part of this whole process, is that how these different paths rank on these different variables to a large extent is inherently subjective. And so there's no way of getting around it. And in terms of best practices of prediction science, which this really boils down to, predicting whether going to grad school is the superior path for you than not going to grad school, thinking probabilistically and attributing numbers to key assumptions is a best practice for this kind of decision. So once all these different career paths have have uh, have sort of are quantified and have numbers associated with them according to the variables in the data set, the next step is to actually just get the results. And so the primary result is, should you go to grad school, yes or no? And the answer here is likely yes, and the reason is because your non-grad school path does not rank in the top 20 of the paths that are in this model. And the recommendation is to get a PhD, because most of these paths, except for 2 MBA and 1 MD in the top 20, are PhD, and then the second most is MBA. And then you can get a feel for how your non-grad school path ranks relative to your to the other paths in this model. And so the simple ranking for your non-grad school path is 66th out of about 500 jobs that are evaluated, or 500 paths that are evaluated. The maximum in terms of, so we did a sensitivity analysis in 1,000 simulations in order to better understand the range of possible outcomes. And we did that by just assuming that all of the subjective inputs, there was a 20% or 10% band of standard deviation around which a random number would be generated and then flow through the model to create a different result for a totally new simulation. And out of 1,000 simulations, the highest the non-grad school path ranks is 7th. The 90th percentile is 20th, and the minimum is 121st. I'll get to the customized jobs later, but that's just a fun one. The and then here's the top here's the top 20 and the bottom 20 based on the preferences and the custom scenario weights. Top and bottom 20 for the wealthy elite scenario, top and bottom 20 for the upper middle class scenario, and top and bottom 20 for the lower middle class scenario. And then, but say you changed your key inputs to, say this was 35, 30, 35. How would how would the answer change? So now the answer of whether you should go to grad school is maybe, because your non-grad school career path actually ranks in the top 20. So you see no grad school is here. And what this really is getting to is that if your non-grad school career path is in the top 20 and there's a lot of uncertainty in this model, you might be better off not going to grad school. But there also are paths that rank higher for you than the non-grad school path. So there's also a chance that you might want to go to grad school. We could further customize these answers. That's the point of this questionnaire. So say, I know I didn't want law, and I know I didn't want hard engineering. I know I don't want hard math science. Let's see how the dashboard changes. So now your non-grad school path shoots up to the 11th ranked score, and you're still recommended to do a PhD, but now you're recommended also to do potentially a master's. And you see economics and AI coding and environmental science are really high. And so we can play with these preferences even more. Say I don't want medicine, I don't want let's see, social science. And then again, and say I don't want a PhD. A master's only. Now the dashboard's completely different, and it's filled with masters and MBA type of roles. And now the non-grad school path ranks #1, and so this model says you shouldn't go to grad school. So that's just a feel for the power of this tool, and just how personal preferences really flow through the model. The last part is that even though this model has around 5,000 or 500 career paths stemming from grad school, those are generic career paths, and there are thousands, maybe even tens of thousands of career paths that could be had stemming from grad school. So this model enables the ability to create a custom career path. So say you thought you knew about this amazing money laundering program, and the career path afterwards would be cryptocurrency trading. It was a 2-year program with $100,000 in annual tuition, but then year 1 out of school, you get $300,000. Year 5, 500. You could just get this astronomical compensation. You'd be making $4 million a year 30 years after grad school. You can fill in the non-monetary and the pleasure fulfillment, and then how this ranks on the different sort of metric, the additional personalization metrics and see how your custom job ranks relative to the other jobs in the model. And what you see is that money laundering ranks #1 across the board just because the money is so good in money laundering. And with that, that is the model. I hope this has this has been productive for you all in terms of helping how you think about the graduate school decision, the no go, the go no go, and especially if you're younger and considering grad school. I hope this has helped you structure your thoughts at least a little bit. Please leave comments in the comment section, and if you've enjoyed this and you're a fan of Art of Pseudo, please follow Art of Pseudo on Twitter. The handle is at Art Pseudo, so at ARTPSEUDO, and also follow me on Twitter. I am at PE so at PESOPHER. Thank you and enjoy.